Hi, everyone. My name is Charlie Minato of halfwheel.com, and welcome to Halfwheel's Top 25 Cigars of 2022, the live show edition. To my right and underneath you on the screen, or underneath me on the screen, hopefully you're not on the screen, is Brooks Whittington.
Howdy.
Hopefully you are on the screen. How are you doing, Brooks, this
I'm
morning?
doing great.
Afternoon?
How are you doing?
Uh, you know, trying to have a more chipper attitude for this week. That being said, thought we were on track for some better sleep, and turns out that did not happen last night or this morning or at all. With all of that out of the way, Patrick Lagreid is in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is also on your screens, hopefully. Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I noticed that was a chippy. That may be the chippiest intro I've ever heard from you on a top 25, because I think, like probably all of us, we've looked at more Excel spreadsheets and photos and web coding and all that stuff than we've probably wanted to. But no, things are good. Sun is shining, and for those that know me, baseball's around the corner, so eagerly anticipating that getting back to work. So.
All right, Patrick, what cigar are you smoking today?
So I actually just looked this up. This is the Reserva Don Carlos from Arturo Fuente. I don't know if I'm always bad at getting this like hand thing done, just whatever.
Yeah, Charlie does the hand. I think it works.
Yeah, you can. It's the
gonna try
Robusto size, I believe it is, in the Don Carlos
Personal
Reserve. Yeah, this has been a cigar that it literally. So where I do my voiceover work is where I also keep my cigars in that office over there, and it's been sitting in a humidor, like looking at me every time I walk in and out of that office. And I went, screw it, today's the day we're going to smoke this. So that's why I picked that one.
All right, Brooks, what are you smoking?
All right, hold on. I'm going to try this. I'm smoking the Tatuaje NHC Tapa Especial, the new one.
Not the NHC.
And this was from a couple years ago.
And I'm smoking a
Charlie, what are you
Fernando Leon something or other.
Oh, nice.
I think it's the reserve. Well, there's like
My
five
favorite
of them.
release.
Something or other.
No, there's like, I mean,
It's one of those,
when
Robert
I am
Caldwell,
confused
write that down. There's something or other.
about the number of cigars that a company has named after the same thing, then we've kind of hit problems. This is, I think, like a Dominican or a Per Cigar exclusive, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Jason Wood, for sending these. He was like, I know you're not going to review it, but I just wanted you to have it. All right, so before we get started with the top 25, I think it's probably important to acknowledge we are not really going to take like questions today, but if you do have comments or maybe have questions throughout, we may like put them on the screen and may try to adjust them if it makes sense. But we will have a very interactive show on Monday. More about that later. That said, we're going to continue with the tradition started yesterday, which has now been rebranded for Typos for Charity. Here's the deal. If you see a typo somewhere on here and you leave a comment on either our Facebook channel or Facebook page or YouTube channel during the broadcast with what the typo is, then you will have the opportunity to win a half-wheel prize pack. The first person who can identify it will win the prize pack. I'll need to figure out what we're actually going to send you, but we'll make it worth your while. If we can manage to get through this broadcast without any typos, which was very unsuccessful yesterday, then we will donate $100 to a food bank of some sort. Yesterday, we did not make it through the broadcast, and Aaron Loomis quickly pointed out a typo, and he decided he didn't need us to send him half-wheel swag, and I guess we're not doing a half-wheel developing palate straight. So instead he asked for us to double the donation, which we complied with, and sent it to the Second Harvest Food Bank in Louisiana. Those are the receipts, but I'm guessing that's not why you're here. Patrick Lagreid, do you want to explain how we sort of start to come up with this top 25 list?
Sure. So the top 25 list is called from cigars that are given a regular review, which those are the reviews that run Tuesday through Sunday. Does not include reduxes, which run on Mondays, as those are single cigars as opposed to 3 cigars, and they are basically aged. They're a way that we revisit cigars that we previously reviewed. So to be eligible for a review, a cigar must have come out in the calendar year or generally the second half of the previous year. Now, in pandemic years, that little note came into play quite a bit as products seem to often be delayed, and we had a glut of cigars that rolled into the following year. Again, there's only so many days in the year and so many of us to smoke them. So sometimes you will see things that were 2021 releases on the 2022 list. So just keep that in mind. Also, the basic requirement is that a cigar was commercially available. That means it can be a regular production, a limited edition, a store exclusive, an event exclusive, or any other number of things that might exclude it from being on another list. It can also be a Cuban cigar, something that other lists often don't include either. Now, I believe that it is incredibly important when you're looking at Cigar of the Year lists to understand the universe of cigars that a publication considers for its list, as that is easily one of the biggest influences on the final list. I mentioned that we no longer, or I have not mentioned, but we have mentioned on the site that we no longer accept samples for review. All the cigars that we review are purchased. And so that was a big change. Not everyone uses that model, and that's up to them. I just really encourage everyone, as you're looking at these lists, to understand the universe that a cigar that ends up on the list could have been chosen from. So with that said, an individual, either Brooks, Charlie, or myself, will review the cigar. We smoke 3 samples. We score them on flavor, several aspects of construction, as well as balance, but price is not considered. The individual fills out a score sheet on Excel. The individual does not know the score at the time that the review is submitted, outside of 2 possible scores, which are 0 and 100. Those are the only 2 scores someone can knowingly give. That is sent then into Charlie, who runs through a multiplier that sort of, I don't want to call it neutralize our own variations. But we use things like top 25 to sort of understand where each of us are relative to each other in terms of cigar scoring. That gives us a multiple or multiplier. We all have our own. And then that gets us to the final score. If a cigar scores 91 or higher, it is therefore eligible for the top 25 list. I believe, Charlie, this is where you're going to take it to explain the top 25 process. That's different from the regular review process.
Yeah, so after a new cigar scores 91 based off of the qualifications that Patrick went over, we will then send the other 3 people. So hypothetically, if Patrick scored a cigar 91 points, then myself, Brooks, Whittington, and Brian Burt will each get one of that same cigar. Each one of us will get one of them, so 3 more total cigars. We will each score them using the same score method, and then they will get inserted into an Excel spreadsheet. Once all of those cigars that are eligible have been scored, we will then tabulate the results, and I don't know, some random Tuesday or something a couple weeks ago, we found out what numbers 1 through 28 were in this case. That would have been helpful during Patrick's explanation, wouldn't have?
Yeah.
Maybe I should take it off the screen before people find typos. And so, oddly, we're all based here somewhere in the southern parts of the United States. And that's kind of what it looks like for the top 25 process. So with that out of the way, I think we can get started with the actual top 25 of 2022. I'm going to sort of break the fourth wall here. One quick reminder for Brooks and Patrick. Let's try to not get bogged down at the beginning of this like we have in the past, so we aren't here for 2 hours doing the show. If you're curious, the goal is going to be to try to get this done in about an hour. So if you're like, screw it, I don't care about anything but number 4, come back in like 50 minutes and we'll see where we're at. All right, number 25. Well, a graphic first. Number 25 on our top 25 cigars of 2022 is the Diamond Crown Black Diamond Marquis. This is a new cigar for 2022, though the Black Diamond name is not new. J.C. Newman, specifically Drew Newman, who is the company's self-described 4th generation owner, decided in 2022 to rebrand and reblend 2 of the company's lines. One of them was El Baton, and the other one was the Diamond Crown Black Diamond. Newman said that he wanted to make it stronger. I didn't necessarily find it to be all that much stronger, if at all stronger, than the previous Diamond Crown Black Diamond. I did find it to be a lot better. This is a cigar that has got just a lot more flavors available, and I felt like it wasn't having to fight to find the flavors like I was with the older Diamond Crown Black Diamond. It still uses a pretty unique wrapper, so a Habano seed, Cuban seed wrappers grown in the Connecticut River Valley, made at Arturo Fuente like the other Diamond Crown cigars. Brooks, curious to know if you found this cigar to be stronger than the previous Diamond Crown Black Diamond.
No, but it is better, quite a bit better. We had tried I had tried a couple of different iterations before that, and it's far and away the best one that they produced. And so there you go.
All right.
Trying to keep it short for you, Charlie.
No, I appreciate it. I wasn't expecting it to be that short. We do have a nomination for the Typo of the Year award here, or Typos for Charity.
You need to get that website name.
Yeah. I'm trying to see. I guess it is.
Typosforcharity.com.
The question is whether or not it got cut off or whether or not it is misspelled. We'll find out later. But Bladen Maynard, I will reach out to you, or if you can email info@halfwheel.com, that would be helpful. And
kind of looks like it was cut off.
With that out of the way, number 24, which I think I'm also supposed to talk about. It is the Padron Family Reserve number 95 Maduro. This is a cigar that debuted it sort of was shown off in 2021. I don't believe it shipped until early 2022. It's offered in both Maduro and natural. It is a weird size for Padron to be making, in my opinion. Almost a nub at 4 3/4 by 60. For me, this cigar is something that if you like 1926 Maduros, I think you'll probably like this cigar. 1926 Maduro is maybe not it is not the Padron blend that I would pick first. It's not a bad blend by any stretch of the imagination. But to me, this really tasted more like a 26 Maduro than any of the 64s or the 26 Natural. I found it to be a bit drier than maybe the 26 Maduro normally is. Lots of earthiness, still a lot of complexity to be found in terms of it. And the one benefit with these larger ring gauge cigars is that, for the most part, it seems like construction certainly, I think, a bit more wiggle room. And with Padron and that slightly loose draw that they tend to have, I found construction to be great. Smoke production was massive. And maybe not my favorite size. Guessing probably, Patrick, not the size that you would gravitate to first if everything else was equal. But at the end of the day, a cigar that tasted like a Padron, and one that I'd smoke, even if the size is still a bit weird to me.
Yeah, and I think what was interesting about this one is that I think for a long time I had been on the natural side of the natural versus Maduro debate when it comes to Padron. But in this one, I definitely like the Maduro better. I'm not sure if it was just the natural variation of the blend, the bigger ring gauge. Maybe my palate and preferences have changed a bit. Who knows? I just thought the Maduro worked better in this. And, to your point, I think I've sort of gotten over this feels like a weird size for Padron kind of thing. Although I will say, give me a Family Reserve Culebra and check back with me. This is just a cigar that works for me. Another great example of what Padron does. And like you say, just enough variance from sort of the other Family Reserves and some of their other well-known cigars.
Family Reserve Nympho would be nice.
It'd be real nice if you want to talk about the number 23 cigar of the year, Brooks.
That would be nice. All right, coming in number 23 is Craft 2022. Now, this is made by Roma Craft Tobacco. And the first Craft was introduced in 2013, and it had an interesting concept. Take parts of each of the company's lines and use them to blend one cigar in a unique vitola. Now, all of these cigars throughout the years that they've been released have been very visually unique. And, this year was no different in that regard. It's a 5x50 Robusto, and each one of the cigars have a completely different outward look and completely different blend, apparently, according to co-owner Skip Martin. This is an interesting cigar because unlike the other cigars on this list that are all supposed to be pretty much the same, this is actually a very different experience every time you smoke it. And the interesting thing is that the construction was excellent. The flavors were excellent, albeit different sometimes between each cigar. But it was an excellent release, and I truly enjoyed it. Not just the flavors, but also smoking it, just having that visual appeal to the wrappers and to the actual cigar is one of the things that I loved about it as well. Sorry, who's that? Charlie, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Craft is historically, I know that I think one of them got close to meeting the top 25 threshold. Maybe two of them did. It's visually been the most interesting Roma Craft releases over the years. Maybe the Cro-Magnon Narwhal notwithstanding. However, It's not been my favorite series of Romacraft cigars. I would much rather smoke the regular production stuff, which is, good news for me because those are much more available than these are. But I really liked this one. It was a very interesting discussion to sort of figure out how to review it. As you mentioned, the cigars are different. We tried our best to sort of review the ones that were similar. We did not end up buying 6 boxes of these to sort of get the exact same ones. But, it's a very good cigar. Rumcraft Tobacco earlier this week won our Factory of the Year for 2022. So not surprised to see them also on the Romacraft did not. Nika Sueño did, but not surprised to see the factory represented here on the top 25 as well. Somebody else is probably talking.
Every year we see a lot of cigars that celebrate anniversaries, and this year was certainly no different. Some of those cigars end up on this list, like our number 22, the My Father Le Bijou 1922 Cien Años Limited Edition Corona Especial. Now, in 2022, My Father Cigars celebrated what would have been the 100th birthday of Jose Garcia Aleon, the father of Jose Don Pepin Garcia and grandfather of Jaime and Yanni Garcia. Since Pepin created Le Bijou 1922 as a tribute to his father, the line got a tweaked blend for this limited edition, though many of the details about the tweak weren't really disclosed. One that was that it uses what the company calls the My Father Habano wrapper. They also refer to it as Oscuro due to its dark brown color, and that tweak led to giving the cigar a little bit fuller profile, a little bit stronger profile, at least according to the sort of the marketing materials. Additionally, all the tobacco comes from the company's farms in Nicaragua. Now, for me, this was a bit of a throwback to the classic Pepin profiles from years past. That big pepper hit up front, then mellowing, then ramping back up. There's lots of big flavors in this one, yet it still feels complex and detailed. And at points offers what I describe as a real full sensory experience between the flavor, the aroma, what you get on the retrohale, what you get on the finish, and then even sort of the ambient smoke as you leave the cigar in the ashtray and you get some aroma off that. Brooks, what do you think of this limited edition from My Father?
Yeah, so I've never really been a huge fan of the Le Bijou blend in general. Some of them I've liked, but this is a completely different monster. It's really, really good, and it really shows what a difference a change in blend can do to a cigar that you're familiar with. And I loved it. I loved the size, and I loved the flavor profile. Was far and away the best that I've tasted out of this line.
Totally agreed.
All right, I believe I am up to talk about our number 21 cigar of the year, and that is the Aganorsa Salif Aniversario Maduro Gran Robusto. Now, this cigar this blend has a very interesting sort of basically 2-year history. It debuted not 25 months ago from now, but in the span of 2 years, so I guess doing the math here, sometime in 2020, Aniversario Maduro 109, something along those lines. A very limited 250 boxes of 10, if I'm not mistaken, run of cigars made in Miami. They had different bands. The color scheme was white instead of this dark gray, almost black color that you see here. Then, as part of the overall sort of Aganorsa Salif rebranding process, that cigar became the Aganorsa Salif Aniversario Maduro, and the bands changed similar to what you see here, except that they were white bands. They no longer said Cas Fernandez. Then, in 2022, the company announced that it was going to take that cigar and that blend and make it a regular production offering. And in the process, moving production from the Cas Fernandez warehouse, essentially, in Doral to their factory in Nicaragua, previously known as TAPSA. And throughout all of it, the blend has remained the same. One thing that really stands out to me with this cigar is that we have reviewed 3 of the 7 blends, or 3 of the 7 sizes so far. The original Cas Fernandez version, 1 of the 2021 versions, and then now 1 of the regular production 2022 versions. The scores have been 90, 90, and 91. So really outstanding, cigars, and props to the consistency there for Aganorsa Salif. One thing, and I'm going to pass it off to you, Patrick, that I found with this cigar in particular was that it looks like it should be strong. It's a Nicaraguan Puro with a Maduro wrapper, albeit a shade grown Maduro wrapper. The bands, the color scheme, very dark. I didn't find it to be all that strong. I found it to be like medium plus, medium full, and was pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah, I think, looking back at my notes, the one thing that stood out was the earthiness in the profile was a little more pronounced than I was expecting, but I think you're right on everything else. This was an interesting cigar for me because, as you said, it scored well consistently despite changes. Now, bands don't make cigars taste different, allegedly.
You say that.
You say that. But certainly you're dealing with crop years, factories, and vitolas. And for whatever reason, Egg and Orsa Leaf, to their credit, has been able to keep this line very, very good, and then this one just got a little bit better, as you say. It was 290s and a 91, and that's what got this into the list this year. Again, just a real nod to consistency, a real nod to a solid line that is really impressive. And again, like I say, if you like an earthy, at least what I found to be a fairly earthy profile, but that still has a lot of good supporting notes around it, this is certainly a great example of one. And so with that, we move up to the number 20 position, when this cigar comes from a series that celebrates the July 4th holiday, and that's the Bandolero Firecracker. The 2022 release tapped Nelson Alfonso's selected tobacco, with the blend a hybrid between two of Bandolero's lines. The Ecuadorian wrapper and binder comes from the Bandolero Aventureros, while the fillers come from the Clandestino or Series C line, which means leaves from the Dominican, Nicaraguan, and then some undisclosed origins. Now, I've always thought the Firecracker line came with a reputation of just being strong pepper bombs. But as I found more times than not, the cigars in this series tend to actually be pretty nuanced. Now, do they have strength? Sure. But a cigar doesn't end up on this list simply for strength. In this case, it was an impressive execution of balancing strength with flavor. And while the complementing flavors are fairly familiar, they are all executed very well. Now, not that every cigar has to offer some unique list of flavors to make this list, but when a cigar offers good expressions of familiar flavors, that is definitely worth recognizing. This one does offer unique flavor, as the final third, as I recall, had a very interesting guava sweetness stand out. Brooks, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this latest installment in the Firecracker series.
Yeah, I loved it. And I always loved, most of the Firecrackers that I've had have been very good cigars. But this does stand out for its flavor combination and really excellent construction. I didn't get any guava sweetness in it, but certainly it is a sweeter cigar than I expected, and it's a fantastic addition to the line, to the series, for sure. All right, coming in at we're doing the thing, right? All right, so we are.
Nope. We're doing number 19, Brooks.
Are we doing the top 5?
Nope.
Okay. Never mind. So, coming in at number 19 is the Oliva Serie V Melanio Maduro Lancero. That's a long name. Now, Melanio Maduro was introduced in 2013, and the line was, that is. Now, this is a limited edition Lancero version, 7x38, and it was only sold in a sampler that was released, and it is a very, very, very good cigar. And one of the reasons why is because while the first third of the cigar has the really standard flavors that I expect from Melanio Maduro, which is a very good blend in its own right. That dry coca powder, dark chocolate, earth. The final 2/3 really went off the rails in terms of flavor profile in a good way. You take that either way, I guess, but in a good way. It went off the rails. And I really found a really unique anise flavor that I really, really enjoyed, and it surprised me quite a bit. Fantastic construction and really a great vitola too. I love the box press Lancero, and it's really, really, really great. So, sorry, who's that?
Me.
Charlie, what did you think about it?
I liked it a lot better than I liked the Serie V Melanio Lancero, which also came in that sampler. I had some construction issues with the Melanio Lancero in particular. I think one of them. But I was editing your review after I'd smoked the regular Melanio Lanceros, and remember being like, okay, well, it looks like Brooks didn't have the same issue that I did, and that's good because the Melanio Maduro blend is good. This is, I believe, the second consecutive year that it has been on this list. And yeah, box press Lanceros are not an everyday thing, and this particular one was done well. That sampler is $66, You get the Figurados in both Melanio and Melanio Maduro. You get the Lanceros, and I believe the Churchills. So a great value, and so long as the construction is good on the regular Melanio Lancero, which Oliva tells me they have noticed that they may need to make some changes and are trying to improve it from a quality control aspect. The other cigars in that sampler are fantastic and longtime favorites here at Halfwheel. All right. Guys, give me 1 second as I rearrange our screens here. It's you, Brooks?
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
All right.
So coming in at number 18 is the Illusione Alegria. And this is an interesting, I'm a sucker for stories behind, cigars and that kind of thing. And this is an interesting one that you can go in the review and read the whole thing. But basically, Illusione owner Dion Gila. I'll just get Dion. The owner of the Illusione, Dion, decided that he was going to purchase the trademarks for a couple of historic brands, One Off and Alegria. And he released One Off before Alegria, the new One Off before Alegria. And then the Alegria came out, and it is... the interesting thing about it is that it is actually quite a bit cheaper than the One Off is. One Off is a very expensive cigar, and Alegria comes in $10 below that. And for the price, I found the Alegria to be quite a bit better, more nuanced, more complex, sweeter, and just a better overall cigar, in my opinion. It was something that it's not as good as some of Dion's really, really, really high end and high, just really, really great cigars that he blends that he's had over the years. But it's definitely something that that deserves to be on the list, and a wonderful cigar that I'll smoke again for sure.
Yeah, very few companies have done as well historically on this list as Illusione has. It's no surprise to see them here again. And Alegria, like you said, it's a sort of a complement, an alternative to One Off at a much more affordable price point, sort of more of an everyday companion to maybe a One Off as a special occasion cigars for a lot of people. And I found Alegria to be great. I mean, I think that we have said it time and time again that there are very few companies and blenders, in Dion Giolito's case, that have had not just the numeric numbers of success, but also a pretty wide range of profiles, considering that he makes cigars in Nicaragua and Honduras, I guess, but uses a lot of the same Aganorsa's tobaccos. Isn't a company that is just using tobaccos from 10 different countries, at least not to my knowledge, and yet is able to make just all sorts of different profiles, different times of days. And also love the packaging here, a little bit more playful than some of the other Illusione packaging, and of the past at least, and also has that little subtle nod to One Off.
Did you like it better than One Off?
I here's the thing, I only smoked 2 Alegrias, so I think there's 6 of them. 5 of them, apparently, according to the picture that's on Brooks' computer right now. So yeah, I don't know. I don't feel qualified to make that assessment. I don't, and we talked about this yesterday. I think unless you're smoking the cigars side by side, to me, it's really, really tough to sort of make those nuanced comparisons. Even as somebody that sort of reviews cigars quasi professionally. All right, Brooks, I think you're back up, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
No, it's me. My bad. One of these days, we're going to let Patrick talk. All right. Number 17 is the La Aurora Fernando Leon Legacy Lancero, which is a completely different blend than the Fernando Leon something or other that I'm currently smoking. And this is an interesting cigar. So one of the things I really like about this is that you see cigars that are named after anniversaries or after people, sort of historical figures or historical figures in the company's history. And a lot of times it's just sort of to pay tribute to that, and there's nothing wrong with it. But this actually has a connection to the late Fernando Leon, who led La Aurora for almost 50 years. Towards the end of his life, and he passed away, I believe, in 2009, La Aurora embarked on a project to try to grow wrapper in the Dominican Republic, specifically in Bonao. And the wrapper that is used on this Lancero is from the first crop that was harvested in that farm in Bonao. And so it's a nice tie back to a project that Fernando Leon oversaw. And the cigar's coming out all these many, many years later. I've said for a long time that there are two factories that stand out to me for their experience in making Lanceros. La Aurora is one of them. My father, Cigars, whether in the U.S. or in Nicaragua, is the other one. And those two factories just have a long list of Lanceros that they have made, and I've enjoyed many of them over the last decade plus. This is just another one in here. It's a nearly Dominican Puro, but not entirely. There is some Brazilian tobacco in the filler, and I found this to be just a great medium full cigar, a bit more of a modern cigar in terms of the blending profile than I think a lot of other La Aurora Lanceros have been. La Aurora is about to embark on a big change here in the U.S. They're taking over their own U.S. distribution, and I'm curious to see kind of if we see a real push to make the branding of La Aurora and the positioning of it a bit more modern. Blends like this really, I think, set the company up for success in that regard. Patrick, I'm curious to know your thoughts. I know you've smoked quite a few La Aurora made Lanceros over the years. How you liked this one? And you're muted.
This one is
Patrick, why don't you start over? I had you muted accidentally.
Yeah, no, I was starting over. Sorry, once you, yeah. No, I think what was interesting about this cigar, and it's not something I get to say all the time, is that it had some components to it that were stimulating sort of new receptors in my taste buds and in my brain. And I don't know if it was the wrapper from Bonal that was just, like I say, it was a new crop, and therefore sort of something unfamiliar to maybe what I had experienced before. If it was the Brazilian tobacco, I find that tends to have an interesting characteristic that I'm still sort of learning how to receive and process. But this is one of those cigars where I wish I'd had the opportunity or obligation to smoke more than one, as I think it really does take a couple to see, to understand, to show, see and show everything that it has to offer, because there is something different about this. And I think if you only smoke one, it registers, but it may not give you the opportunity to really try and unpack what that is in terms of how it hits your taste buds, how it hits your sense of smell, all those things.
Yeah, well, fortunately, I got to smoke more than one of them, so suck it. All right, number 16. You want to talk about someone that's happy and chipper, much like I am all the time.
All the time.
Enrique Sanchez is the founder of Global Premium Cigars, which is known for its 1502 brand, and he is happy and chipper. His 10th anniversary cigar is also number 16 on Half Wheel's Top 25 for 2022. I always like to point out this with Enrique, or about Enrique. There are a lot of people who make cigars in Nicaragua who you could consider to be Nicaraguan cigar makers. Very few of them are actually from Nicaragua. Enrique is actually a Nicaraguan native who got into the cigar industry not because his family was in it, but because later in life he started smoking cigars, I believe when he was in Spain, of all places, and found out that his home country was a player in this industry. And 10 years ago, he launched his own brand. And this cigar is a sort of a different path that he's taken. 1502 has long worked with Plasencia. This cigar is made by AJ Fernandez. That being said, it's still got some clearly 1502 traces to it, particularly if you look at the foot. Enrique employs something called the cigar lock, where it's a like hybrid covered foot, so the wrapper extends just past the end of the foot of the cigar and kind of wraps around it, but the center of the filler is still fully exposed like most cigars are. And this cigar has that, even though it's made at AJ's factory. The thing that really stood out to me about this cigar is that it didn't taste like it was from AJ's factory. And I'm not honestly sure when I was smoking it a couple weeks ago if I even remembered that it was made at AJ Fernandez. But it tasted quite different. It didn't have the sort of punch, the power that I a lot of times find in a lot of AJ blends. And yet, it's probably still one of the stronger cigars within the 1502 portfolio. Brooks, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this.
100% agree with you. It tastes like a combination of AJ and 1502. And look, I've really liked the vast majority of 1502 cigars that I've smoked. And I think it's one of those brands that kind of flies a little bit under the radar sometimes. Enrique is one of the nicest men got people in the cigar industry, and he's even more chipper than I am, and that's saying a lot considering my outfits. And he's great. He's a wonderful guy, and his stuff is good. And this is it's a step in another direction for him. It's it's really. It's really something that he seems to be, It's great. Try it.
All right. Well,
Train of thought on that one.
after that
Sorry.
word salad, Brooks, why don't you talk about the first 10 cigars on the list?
It's great. Okay, so the first 10 cigars, as you see here, the interesting thing when looking at the first 10 cigars, there's a couple of things that really pop out at me. One of which is that there are actually 2 Lanceros on the list, the number 17 and the number 19, albeit one of them is box press. But also the fact that 2 of these cigars actually come from the same, or made at the same factory. That is the factory formerly known as Tabsa. That'd be the Illusione and the Aganorsa. And it's a good list so far, and no doubt. And I can't wait to see the rest. Who's next?
It's Patrick.
That would be me. All right, so now we've got through the first 10. It's time to get to number 15. And I will be the first to admit that I was not crazy about this cigar when it first came out a few years ago. But something about this latest iteration has really changed my tune about it. At number 15, it is the Supreme Leaf Torpedo. And we talked about this earlier with the Aganorsa Leaf Anniversario Maduro. I wish I knew what it was about this cigar that led to the higher score. If it was the tobacco, a tweak to the blend, the Vitola, whatever it was, this went from a cigar I was really not too enthusiastic about smoking again to earning a 93. And me noting not just the flavor and profile, but that the cigar created some really distinct mouthfeel, which is something I think gets overlooked way too much in reviews. Now, as we start to get to this point in the top 25, I think you start finding cigars that are very good and don't need a lot of explanation once you smoke them. This wasn't necessarily a perfect cigar, but the high points were really what carried this cigar, despite some funky spots that I'm hoping resolve themselves with time. Charlie, I know you like this one as a cigar, but also because it reminds you of a certain basketball team we're both fans of. But let's talk about what's underneath that band.
We're talking about tobacco?
Is there like a design or?
Yeah. Is there like a QR code?
You like the band because it reminds you of the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to talk about the
those.
Phoenix Suns? That's going to be depressing as shit.
Absolutely. Well, they won last night.
They did, but it's just...
I
it's not
tried to
going
set you
well.
up. All right.
Who's the
Okay.
Phoenix Suns?
Yeah. So this is a really
Future
good
place
cigar. Second Aganorsa Leaf cigar on the list right now. So congrats to Terrence, Paul, Eduardo, Max, and the team over there. I think that I think I liked the original Supreme Leafs or Supreme Leaf better than you did. What I'm interested in and what I think has been cool about this line in particular is they're releasing one size at a time in like a small batch of them, and then maybe it comes back at some point. They also did something that you rarely ever see a cigar company do, which is they released a Robusto, and then they released another Robusto that was the same length but just 2 ring gauge different. And you could really taste the difference in what 2 ring gauge of the same exact blend and just a little bit more filler, I think, because I think it was thicker the second time around. Maybe I'm off on that. What that did, and all of them have been box pressed to date, but next month we're going to get the first round Supreme Leaf, so you can see what that change does. I think this is one way for a consumer and even a retailer to really sort of see what it's like in a blending room in a lot of ways. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, aging and the sort of vintage of tobacco is going to change the blend, even if it's still the same exact components ratio-wise. But the other thing that we've all experienced over the years when we've been fortunate enough to be in factories while they're putting blends together is that 2 ring gauge makes a difference. Box pressing the cigar makes a difference. Quite frankly, even extending the cigar out a half inch and keeping the ring gauge the same can make a big difference. And this is a line where a company is choosing to show off those minute tweaks. And it doesn't hurt that the blend itself, I think, has pretty good bones. Shout out to the validating line. Shame on Patrick and I for not sneaking that one in there. All right. Let me rearrange some things.
All right, coming in at number 14 is the Fuente Opus X Destino al Siglo Shark. Now, Opus X is one of the most famous cigar brands in the world, and the Shark is actually a very, very unique, Vitola. History goes back decades, really, and you can read all of that history on the review if you'd like. But it is basically a round to square shape that has been used in a number of different blends from Opus X. Now, the Destino al Siglo is a fairly unique blend because we don't know actually what it is. Fuente doesn't actually tell us the tobacco that comes into that blend. I found this to be really fantastic The regular Opus X blend is something that I know a lot of people love, and I love it as well. But I tend to like it with a little bit more age on it. This specific blend has quite a bit more. It's creamier. It's not as strong. It's not as aggressive as I find the regular Opus X blend to be when it's fresh. I prefer it with about 5 years age on it. But this is really, really fantastic when it comes to actually having that combination of strength. It's still a fairly strong cigar. It's a medium full cigar, but it's not as aggressive and certainly a lot creamier and sweeter than I find the regular Opus X blend to be.
No, it's absolutely. And I wish I
Patrick.
knew what the differences were. I think the way that I've tried to describe this to some people is this is like the morning Opus X, maybe. And I love that. I have found that my palate has gravitated a little more towards that, medium full flavor, not necessarily rooted in strength, but rooted in sort of creaminess and layering of flavors. And I thought the Opus X Destino al Siglo Shark did that really well. The size is unique. It's one of the few probably patentable sizes in the cigar world. And I don't know if it made a huge difference. I know we've had some conversations about the Lancero in this blend. But I think what's really nice about this is just that you can take the Opus X blend, keep a lot of its core, but just lighten it up a little bit and make it a cigar that you can smoke, mid-morning, cup of coffee, that kind of cigar, and get a really rich, rewarding experience.
Yep.
So with that, we move up to lucky number 13. And this cigar actually has 13 in the name of it. It's the Alec Bradley Fine and Rare BC 134EV. Alec Bradley's Fine and Rare returned in 2022, and the cigar, known for having 10 types of tobacco, might have just had its best showing yet. Now, it's a big Churchill that uses a Honduran Criollo 98 wrapper. The binders are from Honduras and Nicaragua. The fillers are from Honduras and Nicaragua. And while we've already talked about a cigar that was actually named Firecracker, this may be the real firecracker of the list. As Brooks noted in his review, this had some really intense flavors and some fairly unique ones, including cloves and tea leaves, as well as your more traditional flavors that come from Honduran and Nicaraguan tobacco. Brooks, again, this is your review, and so I'm kind of leaning on you for this one. What was it about this iteration of the Fine and Rare that you found so appealing?
Well, like you said, the flavors were just, it was almost, not quite, but almost overwhelming with the number of flavors and the different types of flavors that were coming in. Those 10 tobaccos that make up the blend have got to have something to do with that, I would imagine. And it is, it's wonderful. It's one of the better Fine and Rares that I've had. And I've smoked most of them over the years, and I really enjoyed this specific one. The cloves, especially, was really, really, really distinct, and something that I really enjoy in cigar profiles when it shows up. And this was a fantastic cigar, and it's wonderful. I loved it. So, coming in at number 12 is the Aladino Cameroon Gordo. Now, this is an interesting blend because it actually uses a Cameroon seed wrapper that's grown in Honduras. This is a Honduran Puro. And, for the longest time, I was not as impressed as I wanted to be with Honduran tobacco. I would taste something with Honduran tobacco in it and be like, it's okay, it's good. But, Aladino and the Aroas specifically have really, really changed my mind on this. They are making some fantastic cigars, Honduran Puros, and I really, really am impressed with the flavors that they can pull out of, a Puro like this. Interestingly, I love the Lancero in this blend and went out and bought a box of them, in fact, that I loved it so much. But the Gordo is not quite as good as Lancero, I don't think, but it is really, really fantastic. And it's really interesting. I'm not going to say that because you're going to mention that. But I really loved it. If you like me were on the fence about Honduran tobacco at a certain point, and you should really try some of this, some of the Aladinos or the Aroas stuff. It is fantastic and well worth trying out. Charlie, what did you think?
What were you going to mention that I was supposed to mention?
What was it? Hold on.
Well, I'm going to start
difference in the Gordos and how we don't think that the Lanceros are good, but the Gordos,
You just said you thought the Lancero was better. Interesting story. The Lancero.
About the sizes and how the different sizes.
Oh, yes. Interesting story. The Lancero was on last year's list at number 17. So despite Brooks's proclamation that he thinks the Lancero is better, the three of us have overruled him. And the Gordos scored higher on the list. Congratulations to JRE on having a blend show up back-to-back years on this list. That is a relatively rare occurrence, though not impossible. And, I think if you had asked the staff, we generally gravitate towards smaller ring gauge cigars. I think just based off of everything else is equal. But over time, we've certainly learned that a blend is going to work best in a size, and just because we want it to be thinner than 60 ring gauge doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the case. There are certainly advantages to 60 ring gauge cigars, and this shows it off. And like a lot of other JRE cigars, price point great, construction excellent, and I think that their rendition of the Cameroon, which they did back when the Aroa still owned Camacho. It's not Cameroon. It does not taste exactly like the African-grown version of it, but it's got a unique, sort of profile, as Aaron Loomis refers to it as Honduran, and it's good enough to make this list 2 years in a row. So that's kind of all you need to know about it, I think, and a pretty affordable price point at that. We're stinking this around, so it's me to talk about our number 11 cigar of the year, and that is the Mi Querida Black Saka Khan. Now, this is an interesting cigar in the sense that it actually debuted as something else. This came out in 2021 as a 50th anniversary cigar for JR Cigar, the New Jersey-based retailer that has a very famous catalog, online storefront, etc. And Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust decided, or I think probably had predetermined that they were going to do this anyway, but it is going to be another version of the Mi Querida blend. So you have the regular blue label Mi Querida, you have the Tricky Traca, which is the red label, and now you have the black label, which the company has said they're going to add more sizes to this year. But this exact cigar, 7 1/4 by 54, was released in 2021 under a different name for JR. I find this cigar, curious to see if the rest of the blends or the rest of the sizes in this blend play out like this. I found it to be a more elegant and sort of refined version of Mi Querida. It's also notable here. I believe this is the second year in a row that Noxa has got the number 11 cigar of the year. I believe Dapper was in this place last year. For those of you that are really keeping, top 25 trivia like Brooks is over here doing.
That's right.
So, Patrick, you actually bought a box of the JR release. You liked it so much, and you got to be happy that it's here, number 11.
Yeah, I mean, look, I first experienced this one under the JR Cigars release, and I remember being just pleasantly surprised by this cigar. And you look at this really large stick wrapped in a dark broadleaf wrapper. It's Mi Querida Black. It's got a name like Saka Khan, which just sort of inspires this monstrous, profile, and yet it's not that at all. It's, if anything, I remember it more for how it worked the other end of the spectrum. It's still, a fairly beefy cigar, but it's impressively tame with the pepper, and it's all those other little things that came together to make it really impressive in my book. And this is a cigar that, as much as I like to smoke it, I also like to share it with people who appreciate cigars with profiles that maybe aren't exactly familiar, or they're willing to be a little bit more adventurous, or they can dissociate what a cigar looks like from how it actually tastes. But this has become one of those ones that if I know that you are, an open-minded cigar smoker, you're probably going to get one of these from me. And so I'm really excited to see what else, what the other Vitolas look like in this, and if they can hold up the experience of the Saka Khan Vitola. And I will just give a quick shout out to Steve. If you haven't read the backstory of the Saka Khan name, check out the review on Half Wheel. He explains it. It's kind of cool. So.
Yeah, and if you see Patrick Lagreid walking around the street, tell him you're an open-minded cigar smoker, and he's going to give you a $15.95 cigar, apparently.
I didn't say I carry him with me. Come on now. All right, recap time, is that right? So here is the first 15, I believe. So for those of you who are jumping in a little late, we want to take a look at the list and where we're at so far. Nice, good mix of cigars on here so far. So hopefully some of you agree with, maybe some you're surprised with. While you're taking a look over that, I wanted to give a quick reminder that the Puro Sabor Festival is coming up in Nicaragua next week, and I will be down there covering that festival. So make sure you check out Half Wheel and our social media. As much coverage as the Nicaraguan internet will allow me to provide will be coming your way for that. So hopefully you see some good factories and farms and other fun stuff coming out of Nicaragua for their festival. All right, Brooks, what do you say? Want to move on to number 10?
All right, let's break into the top 10 with another cigar from Dunbarton, the Sin Compromiso Paladin de Saca. Now, Sin Compromiso translates to without compromise from Spanish. And this is a series of cigars that Saca has released. This is a 7x50 box press Churchill. And while it uses the same basic components as the rest of the Sin Compromiso line, it's actually a little bit different because inside of it is actually the first time that Saca has added Pennsylvania Ligero in the filler. Now, this is to make it a little bit more robust, according to Saca. It also has a regular box press instead of a softer box press like the rest of the line. Now, I love this cigar, and one of the reasons that I loved it was because it is extremely bold. It has an extremely bold profile, but it also is very, very balanced as well. A lot of times you start talking about Pennsylvania Ligero or some stronger, more aggressive tobacco like that. You're going to get into a lot of trouble when it comes to overwhelming some of the nuance in the actual profile itself. And this is not one of those cigars. It's bold, it's balanced, and it's got just a wonderful number of flavors that I really enjoy. Charred meat, mesquite, all balanced together with some really nice sweetness. Great construction and just a really, really wonderful cigar that I enjoyed quite a bit. Patrick.
Yeah, no, and I'll throw another B word in the description that
Brooks.
the cigar was not. Was brash. A lot of times, when we're thinking of words to describe cigars and reviews, you have to start finding lines at which, where does a lot of stimulation become irritation? Where does bold turn into overwhelming? And this cigar seemed to really toe that line quite nicely. As I had my notes, this is bold, but far from brash. And I think this one also excelled really nicely in the aroma. And when you combine those two things, you got a cigar that really was greater than the sum of its parts. And much like I thought about the number 2 that I reviewed back in 2018, this is a cigar that really does get better the more attention you give it. And I think that's true with a lot of them. But, if you come into this clear mind, focused, you'll get a lot of nuance and detail out of this, which is, again, something really nice to say about a cigar where maybe the leading term is bold.
Yeah, this was one of those cigars that I really, really made me, appreciate the blending, prowess of Saca, and it's really, really great. And y'all should go try it if you have not. All right, coming in at number 9 is the Intemperance EC18 Reverence. Now, this was a release that was actually inside of the Roma Craft Tabacs, El Catador de las Gran Coronas. I say that 6 times fast. It translates to the taster of Gran Coronas from Spanish. 16 count sampler, 2 each of 8 different blends. And this is, in my opinion, the best cigar in this sampler. It was, a Connecticut wrapped cigar and very smaller, a smaller size. And I just, the flavors that this cigar came up with were amazing to me. And excellent construction from Nicky Sueña, the Factory of the Year this year, as you mentioned. And it just all around was really, really fantastic. I've really loved the Intemperance EC line. BA's line is good as well, and I've loved those as well. But this size and this blend just seems to hit all the numbers for me. It's wonderful. Charlie, you liked it as well, didn't you?
I mean,
obviously.
Yeah, it's in the top 10. In order to get here, we're all going to have to like it, and they're all 6 cigars that get smoked for this are going to have to be pretty good. I would say this about Roma Craft. It's a relatively young company in comparison to most cigar companies. And it is one of the companies that I think of when I just want to go get a cigar and know what I'm going to get. The consistency that these blends have is particularly impressive. I think that collectively we've probably liked Intemperance BA more than EC, and I think we've liked EC more than we've liked the Whiskey Rebellion. There's a fourth Intemperance line coming out this year, the Volstead. So I'm curious to taste that and see what the next line from Roadcraft Tobacco's got. But this is no slouch, and fortunately, they obviously, as Brooks mentioned, the El Catador samplers came out earlier in the year, and then at the end of the year, they released the cigars that were in the El Catadors that aren't regular production in regular boxes. I believe 300 of them. So there was a chance to sort of come back in at the end and pick which one you liked and get some more of them. And we actually did that in the case of this EC blend. So throw Patrick on the screen. Gonna take you off. Gonna take me off. And
with that, we head to number 8, the latest cigar to use Florida sun-grown tobacco, the 20-acre farm Robusto. Now, I've been a fan of Florida sun-grown tobacco, both as a project and for the tobacco it generates, as it kind of hits a sweet and spicy profile that I tend to really like. It also seems to be a tobacco that really needs to be blended around so that it has a truly complementary set of leaves around it. And that's what was the case here. Looking back in the reviews, seeing notes like cashews, lemon citrus, cloves, cinnamon, and cedar makes me think this is probably the only cigar I smoked all year with that specific combination. Plus, there's still this really enjoyable creaminess that weaves its way through the cigar. And when you get all that coming together, you get a really distinctive profile. And it remains a cigar that I recommend to people if we're in a shop and they're looking for something they haven't tried before, both because, again, it uses Florida-grown tobacco, but I think it's a approachable yet still somewhat adventurous cigar. Charlie, curious to hear your thoughts about this one, and I know you want to talk a little bit, too, about how this particular cigar came to market.
Yeah, it came to market. We recognized Drew Estate as our company of the year earlier in the awards week, and one of the things that I mentioned this in the write-up, I was trying to think, as we were nominating companies about sort of, what company seems to have taken a different path post-COVID or post the start of COVID. And Drew Estate, they've started these YouTube live shows that run a bit smoother than this one probably has. And they're called Freestyle Live Events. There were a lot of cigar companies that started some form of, video podcast type things during the pandemic or during the early days of the pandemic. And Drew Estates is still going. And they've also decided to figure out a way to take it from just a virtual, we're all going to sit around and smoke cigars on YouTube and make it into something that the retailers can get involved in and the consumers can get involved in. And the way they do that is they use it as a way to introduce new lines. So in this case, I believe it was the second Freestyle Live Event cigar. What they do is they send out these sampler packs to retailers to sell to consumers that have one of each of the vitolas that they're going to introduce, unbanded, and then they also have some swag that doesn't tell you exactly what the cigar is going to be. They give about a month for the retailers to sell them, consumers to smoke them. They ask the consumers and the retailers to tune in for a live show. They give away prizes for both the retailers and the consumers. I'm pretty sure in this instance it was a 4-door Jeep Wrangler was the grand prize for a consumer. And it's, to me, just a really, really smart way for a company as large as Drew Estate to interact with its retailers and consumers and use that Drew Estate marketing machine that they've built up in a really effective manner. And they recently did another Freestyle Live event with the Blackened M81. They're a cigar that's in collaboration with the members of Metallica and the Blackened Whiskey brand. And for me, the 20-acre farm, I think it's got to be my favorite cigar that's got the FSG tobacco in it. A close second, though, the Corona Cigar 20th anniversary Maduro, I want to say, made by Aganorsa. That cigar is very, very good. But if I had to pick between this and Drew Estate's FSG, I'd take this 10 out of 10. I think it's a much more refined cigar. Not sure how much of the Florida tobacco shines through. You have a lot more experience with that than I do, Patrick, because you actually visited the farm in Claremont. But a good cigar, a great cigar, obviously, in the top 10 here. All right, Brooks.
All right. Coming in at number 7 is the Las Calaveras Edición Limitada 2022 LC54. Apparently, I get all the Spanish named cigars. Las Calaveras translates to the skulls from Spanish. And, this is this series started in 2014, and it's become fairly fairly popular, I would say. Now 34 different release sizes in the line. And I believe that Charlie gave the first Robusto a 94.
It was a very good cigar.
It was a very good cigar. This is not that good, but it is very, very good. And it's also the first Nicaraguan Puro to be released in the series. Now, I enjoyed it. I was hoping it would have a little bit more sweetness on the retrohale, but the flavor profile is excellent with creamy nuts and bread, toasted bread. It's a really, really, really great cigar, and something that it just builds upon the success of the series and just proves that this series is one of the better ones that I look forward to every year. Charlie.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure this was not mentioned. This is the second time that Las Calaveras has gone back-to-back on the top 25 list.
It was not mentioned.
Yeah.
Should have been.
Trying to give Brooks some help here.
Yeah, you gave me a lob ball, and I missed it. Yeah, so that's it, and that's impressive in its own right.
Yeah, so in 2014 and 2015, Las Calaveras made the top 25 list. Still remarkable to me that Las Calaveras, the 2014, didn't win Cigar of the Year. That's how good that top 5 was. All playing for keeps there. And then last year, Las Calaveras Edición Limitada 2021 was on our list, and it's back here in the top 10 for 2022. So congrats to John Huber, Mike Conder, and the team at My Father that makes these cigars. One thing that's been really impressive to me about Las Calaveras is that, I think a lot of people get caught up in the colors. This may not be my favorite one. It's a little bit too close to Tar Heel Blue for me. But, the idea that they've been able to make all these different blends, and I don't really feel like they've become too homogenous. They've all had a little bit of differences and consistently have performed pretty well over the years. And obviously, once again, back-to-back, that's impressive. And congrats to the team, including a different Miguel, not the Miguel that's on the screen right now, but congrats to Miguel and Brian and all of the Crown Heads team as well. And now that I've turned into Brooks, I'm going to hopefully pass this on to somebody else. Patrick, do you want to take over this train wreck?
Number 6 is all mine, and it is the Mi Querida Tricky Traca number 448. This is the 5th size in the line, the shortest, and tied for the thinnest with the number 648, and certainly one of the best. And given that this line has roots in United Cigars Firecracker series, I almost feel like I could repeat a lot of what I said about the Bandolero Firecracker, namely in that cigars named Firecracker, or in this case, named for a type of firecracker that's been strung together and is commonly found in Nicaragua, there's a bit of an expectation, and that expectation sometimes can be limiting. But this is really a firecracker of flavor, and even just at 4 inches long, it makes some impressive transitions in both flavor and body, as well as the aroma. Now, one of the things I found interesting about the 3 samples I smoked for my review is that each one was just a little bit different from one another. And while we certainly value consistency in cigars, there is something enjoyable about those variations that end up painting a truly complete picture of the blend. I equated it to seeing a musician play a couple of concerts in a row. It's still the same song or the same show, but there's always some variance to it that enhances the overall experience. Construction was also fantastic across all the samples, so a big nod to the Noxa factory for that. Brooks, we talked about the Bandolero Firecracker, so seems only fitting that you and I talk about the Mi Querida Tricky Traca. What did you think of the 448?
That is fitting. And as you mentioned, you could just repeat a lot of the stuff because of the name, but these 2 cigars obviously are very, very different. This is a bold cigar, and I hate to say the word bold again, with considering the last cigar that I talked about was bold as well. But this is bold. It's got pepper. It's got just a really great profile, and it's a smaller cigar that really hits you hard. Not necessarily in strength, but just a punch of flavor. It was wonderful. It was fantastic, and it's something that I could smoke again and again and again, and not feel like I feel like I haven't smoked 4 or 5 in a row, but I feel like I could smoke again and again and again and not get bored with it. And that's something that I think is a really good testament to the blend itself.
I feel like I've smoked 5 cigars in a row. This is the first 20. We got the top 5 coming up, and it's a very diverse list in a lot of ways, and yet maybe not our most diverse list that we've ever put together. But a lot of great cigars on here. Congrats to Saka. That's the third Dunbarton release on this list. And yeah, if you got questions or comments, want to throw them in there as I try to figure out what I'm going to say next. I think we're just going to go to the top 5, unless anyone's got anything else we need to take care of. If someone could bring me some pizza soon, that would be helpful. But
I'll go right out.
We're going to go for the number 5. And at number 5, it is 22 minutes to midnight, Connecticut Radiante Toro. This is from Lost and Found. 2022 was a major turning point for Lost and Found's business model. They are no longer finding lost cigars, it seems like. Robert Caldwell told me that, during COVID, the cigar factories were cleaned out of what he determined to be the sort of good orphan cigars that Lost and Found used to buy and repackage as part of their business model. And so what they have done is they have started to commission cigars and then have them purposely aged. In the case of 22 Minutes to Midnight, this cigar was aged for 2 years after it was rolled at the El Maestro factory, which is the smaller, the original William Ventura factory, not the one that unfortunately had a fire last year, but they are rebuilding the main Tabacalera William Ventura factory. And this is a cigar, I mentioned it in the review, that I talked about how at its worst points, it was still very, very good. And I feel like I might have been underselling it because at its high points, it was also an excellent cigar. Not the most affordable cigar in the world. However, it is a cigar that is now offered in 10-count boxes. It was originally introduced in 20-count boxes, so a bit more affordable. Caldwell had an interesting Instagram message about, now you should be able to afford it. I think he didn't change the price, though, of the actual cigar itself, so still $22, at least until the next price increase. And a great, great cigar. There are 4 22 Minutes to Midnight blends. 2 of them are sort of the Caldwell blends, and 2 of them are Tony Bellotto-esque blends. I've not smoked either of the Bellotto ones yet, but I'm curious to try it and curious to see kind of what comes of Lost and Found 3.0, I guess we're at, because it was impromptu, then Lost and Found, and now we're at the second iteration of Lost and Found, but the third iteration of the company. Brooks, curious to know your thoughts on this cigar.
Yeah, I love the Connecticut, the way that this Connecticut wrap, blend tasted. It was really, really great from start to finish. And the smaller size, I think, really helped the the distinctness of the actual, helped to bring out the flavors from the wrapper. And while I found it to be a little stronger than I was expecting, I think that it was very balanced, and certainly one of the more balanced cigars on the list, considering the 5th place that it got. I liked it, and the price is a bit much for me for a smaller cigar like that. Not for me personally. Oh, Toro. Sorry. The price is still
it's still $22.
It's still not great, all right.
Yeah, it's
but it's well worth the price when you talk about enjoyment and what you're getting out of the cigar. It's very, very good.
All right, and coming in at number 4 is another cigar that's got a Connecticut shade wrapper on it. It is the Rocky Patel White Label Toro. Notable thing about this Connecticut shade wrapper, though, is that this is actually from Connecticut. It is from the Connecticut River Valley, and it is an excellent cigar. It's also not a Davidoff, which I think most people probably associate the White Label name with, but Rocky Patel has the trademark for White Label, and they leaned in and went after Davidoff without question. It's another $20+ cigar. It is a great cigar. I believe this is Rocky Patel's highest ranking on our top 25 list, and it is well deserved. I was extremely impressed by this. I find, and I know Patrick, you're someone that's been to Connecticut and been to the fields in Connecticut. The thing with Connecticut seed tobacco grown in Connecticut, to me, doesn't look as pretty as the Ecuadorian varietals oftentimes do. And we hear that a lot from the people that buy and sell tobacco. However, I find the mouthfeel to just be it's different. It's not that it's like different from just the Ecuadorian stuff. It's got something that is unique in and of itself to the shade-grown stuff that's grown in Connecticut, which unfortunately there's less and less of as the years go by. I'm curious to know your thoughts as someone that I know you really like, the differences and the minutia of shade tobacco.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think it's sort of one of the unfortunate things that we have the word Connecticut getting used in multiple instances. Just in the U.S., you have Connecticut Shade and Connecticut Broadleaf, two very drastically different types of tobacco. And then you have Connecticut Grown and Ecuadorian Connecticut. And while they have sort of similar profiles, they do have some very distinct nuances and differences to one another. You're absolutely right. I keep going back to, USA Grown Connecticut has that sort of sourdough bread is maybe the most consistent. And I tend to think of that as carrying over to the mouthfeel. This was impressive to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, it showed that Connecticut as a leaf can continue to evolve and how it works with other blends or other tobaccos, that a Connecticut wrapped cigar really can mean a lot of different things, as opposed to not that long ago where Connecticut was open code for just mild and sort of bland. This in a lot of ways can be a meaty cigar, but yet it also allows a lighter, brighter fruit note to shine through. And the one that you mentioned in your review that got me was ramen noodles. And I know you and I have had ramen a couple of times, and the evolution of how a bowl of ramen changes with time and as the noodles sit and absorb more water and become chewier, just that kind of stuff. I mean, that I find just fascinating how that ends up working out. This, again, as you mentioned, not the cheapest Rocky Patel cigar. I'm just really intrigued to see if this can find a place and stay consistent over the years, because this is a really, really impressive cigar from Rocky Patel.
Yeah, now that you've made me hungry, I'm going to turn this over to you and go grab some pizza.
There you go. See you in 20. So we hit to the number 3 spot, and it is the Davidoff Master Selection 2014. Now, the Master Selection series traces its roots back to Eladio Diaz and cigars that he created for himself in celebration of his birthday. They were never formally released, but they did garner a real reputation amongst Diaz's friends who had the chance to smoke them. 6 cigars debuted in this series back in 2017. It would be 5 more years before any more would. In 2022, we got the 2012 edition, and this one, the 2014. Now, Diaz is no longer with Davidoff, of course, so his name and signature are no longer on the bands and the boxes. It's been replaced by Julio Martinez, but this cigar still lives up to the lofty expectation that comes with being called the Master Selection Series. Now, of course, it checks the boxes of complexity, balance, nuance, etc. But one of the things that stuck out for me was how well the puffs and the retrohales work together. A lot of my reviews, you'll see me saying, if you're not retrohaling this, you're not getting the full experience, and that was the case here. They really do complement each other. They allow the smoker to access more of what the blend and the cigar has to offer, and those combinations help take the cigar on a real journey from what I described as smoked custard in the first third to a robust earthiness with punchy pepper by the end. Now, beautiful construction. This is a really special cigar, and to borrow a line from one of your reviews, Charlie, this is a cigar that all you have to do is smoke it and you'll understand why it's a good cigar. And I think this is one of those cigars that I had a pretty strong feeling when I smoked it that it would be in contention for Cigar of the Year, and certainly a number 3 finish. Very impressive from the cigar from Davidoff.
Yeah, to me, this one, I mean, you did the review, but I can't imagine that, Davidoff necessarily thought that this would be the cigar that would end up here amongst, the Winston Churchill Limited Edition 2022, the Year of the Rabbit. But great cigar. Unfortunate that it was a pretty small release. I believe only sold at the Davidoff flagship stores around the world. So tough to get. But I'm glad that we bought it and decided to review this one. I don't think that these cigars have really ever been... They certainly have never tasted to me like an Eladio Diaz birthday cigar. The few that I've been able to be fortunate enough to smoke, they've been a bit milder than the Eladio cigars have been, particularly in strength and body. But this is an excellent cigar. And maybe not the most typical Davidoff profile, but I mean, at this point, the Davidoff... banded cigars have such a diverse profile between, the classic stuff in Nicaragua, and then obviously the limited edition stuff. But Davidoff is no stranger to finishing towards the top of our list. Not surprised in any way to see them here, and wish we had more of these.
Very true. And with that, let's move on to number 2, and this is the Companion de Warped. Now, as the story goes, this line was born when Kyle Gellis came across a Mexican San Andreas wrapper when he was in the Dominican Republic sourcing tobacco for some other projects. When he sampled the leaves, he knew he wanted to make a cigar around them, and looks like it was a pretty good decision. Companion Day Warped offers a really rich, earthy, robust profile, highlighted by a good but never overwhelming amount of pepper. And while I wanted a bit more sweetness and creaminess from the profile, what the cigar did offer was some of the best in those categories in 2022. Now, it gets its name from the idea that this is a cigar that can be taken anywhere with you as a companion to daily life. But this cigar really does smoke like a special occasion stick. It was produced by Tabacalera La Isla, and I have to give that factory credit for near flawless construction on the samples that I smoked. I think we smoked collectively, as I think this ranked second in our construction scores. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is also a really impressive cigar for the price. You know, we don't factor price into our reviews or the Cigar of the Year list, but to get this kind of performance from one of the less expensive cigars on this list is just another reason to like it. Even though $12 for a Rothschild might seem kind of high for some people, I still think it's a really good value proposition. Brooks, interested to hear your thoughts on our number 2 cigar.
Yeah, the ROI on this is really great. You know, I've loved a lot of Warp's stuff, and this is really one of the best that they've released, in my opinion, that I've tasted. It's wonderful in complexity. The flavors are there. The construction, as you mentioned, is fantastic. I only smoked one of them, but I didn't have a problem at all with it, and it was excellent. And if you're gonna choose a smaller cigar that has just a massive amount of flavor, then this is definitely the one to go with, in my opinion. Were you going to do something, or I want you to say something so I didn't have them? All right, and here we are, number 1. The number 1 cigar of the year for 2022 is the Alfonso Extra Añejo number 3 by Selected Tobacco SA. Now, this is a cigar produced in Costa Rica. The blend is made up of an Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapper and binder covering Nicaraguan Ligero and Peruvian filler tobaccos. Now, this is the first time that Selected Tobacco has taken the top spot on our annual list, and there are 3 very unique things about the cigar that may point to the reason why it won this year. First, in a nod to the use of French oak in winemaking, Selected Tobacco aged the cigars in both cedar and French oak for 5 years. Most of the previous cigars on this list were probably aged for less than 6 months before being shipped to retailers. And that combination of using non-standard French oak and a large amount of time also likely contributed to some of the distinct flavors in the profile. Second, the fantastic construction that the Alfonso exhibited was a major factor when it came to the final score. The Alfonso is not only the top-rated cigar on this list, but also exhibited the best construction across all cigars on the list. In fact, the difference between the first and the second place was only 0.05 percentage points of a point, which means that the construction on the Alfonso made a pretty big difference. Finally, the profile of the Alfonso features flavors that are far and away some of the best that I have had in a cigar in a very long time. At times, the cigar is nutty, creamy, and sweet, along with some really great white pepper on the retrohale. There are many who will point out the $40 price tag, and that's a valid concern. But in the end, the Alfonso Extra Añejo number 3 is easily enjoyable enough to justify the cost. Charlie, what did you think of the number 1 cigar of the year?
It's a good cigar. I've liked a lot of the Atabes, Byron's, Bandoleros. Haven't smoked the new Byron 1850, which uses the same or has the same similar French oak and Spanish cedar aging room aspects to it. But yeah, like, it's number 1 cigar of the year on our list. It takes a lot to get here, and this scored really well. Fortunately, unlike some other years, this one's a lot more available. It's still not the easiest cigar to get, and certainly not the cheapest cigar. It's the most expensive cigar on the list. But yeah, I mean, the construction stands out, the flavor stands out, and the packaging's not bad either. So congratulations to Nelson Alfonso, the team at Selected Tobacco, United Cigar Company, which is the distributor for Selected Tobacco here in the U.S., and everyone at Tobacos de Costa Rica, which is the factory that I think makes all, if not most, of the Selected stuff. So a a great cigar from them, and a surprise, certainly the first Costa Rican cigar to win #1 cigar of the year from Halfwheel, and that is going to lead us to the list in its full format. Hopefully, there it is. For those of you that want to see all of it all at once, yeah. Patrick, you're doing the vamping here, right?
Yes. So, again, there is the full list. Interesting to see some of the comments come in, and definitely, again, there's lots you can. I don't want to say there's anything you can read into the list or read out of it. Obviously, as we talked about, you have to consider the universe of cigars that were smoked over the year. There were some cigars that we were not able to get to in 2022 that could very well show up on the upcoming list, and there was some that were very close. There have been some very highly regarded cigars that got a 90 in the review, but that doesn't get you into the consideration for the top 25. How many do we have total in the eligible list? 28 this year. So, again, it was. I know we're going to talk a little bit about this. I thought the grouping of scores was fairly interesting this year. I thought it was maybe, a little flatter at the top, but really impressive sort of in the middle and, sort of the rest of the list. I don't think there were maybe as many high points, but there are a lot of really very good cigars this year.
Yeah, welcome to Halfwheel's Top 25 of 2022. We're going to say one thing nice and then say two things mean. All right, so
it's in our nature.
Special shout-outs here. For those of you that are wondering, some of you pointed out already, companies with multiple cigars on this list. Congratulations to Steve Saka and Dunbar Tobacco and Trust for putting 3. Aganorsa Leaf, Romacraft Tobacco, Selected Tobacco, each put 2 cigars on the list, and that's impressive. I was mentioning sort of earlier, alluding to this, that it's a diverse list, and yet in some ways, when you look at the numbers, maybe not the most diverse list. Obviously, these companies have 9 of the top 25 combined between the 4 of them. And when you look at the factories, you can see these factories actually combined have the majority of the top 25 on the list here. The factory at the top there, Agricola Ganadera Norteña Aseada. There's no
you catch one Brooks has?
Hey, you want me to?
Yeah.
I mean, who
let
knows?
The professional Spanish speaker take that. Would you please?
I feel like I am 47 years old and about to fall asleep if Patrick just keeps talking longer.
Was that a dig on
the rate
my
that we're
age?
going? Are you 47?
47.
No, look at that.
Don't look at day past 56.
Doing that math on the top of my head. Yeah, I do feel a bit like Brooks in the many different ways. Congratulations to Tabacalera Fuente. A Fuente, you see it. That's the Arturo Fuente factory. Nica Sueño, My Father, Nicaraguan American Cigars Aseada, better known as Naxa, and then obviously Tabacos de Costa Rica for putting multiple cigars on this list. Somebody had a question earlier, which is sort of related to this, about why there weren't any Cuban cigars. So by country here, for those of you that are not familiar with your Latin American flags, that would be Costa Rica with 2 cigars. You guys hopefully can read the rest of that there. Hopefully there's no typos. So somebody asked why there's no Cuban cigars on the list. There are many reasons why. I'm going to go over some of them briefly before I pass out. You should remember that this is a list of new cigars, highest rated new cigars that Halfwheel does, and that really causes problems for the current state of Cuban cigars. Number 1, there are not as many new Cuban cigars that are coming out. Allegedly, according to Cuban Cigar website, I believe there were 3 Edición Limitada cigars for 2022. I don't think Habanos has publicly acknowledged 2 of them. Edición Limitada cigars used to be an annual staple. They would come out in the second half of the year. They were pretty easy to get, all things considered. And since COVID started, not only have Edición Limitada cigars, Edición Regional cigars have gotten even more delayed, and plenty of other things, whether it's regular Cuban line extensions, new lines, etc. And then there's the other problem of when Cuba does have a new product, they don't seem to ship all that many of them to stores. So you have something like the Cohiba 55, which Brooks saw in Cuba, and you have some. I think you've smoked some.
I do and did, yes.
Yeah. I'm guessing that most cigar stores that sell Cuban cigars have not seen those cigars. I know Phoenicia had a launch in the Middle East. There was the event in Havana in September, but those cigars don't seem to be all that available, even at $100 or $200 per a piece, whatever the hell the price point is these days.
More than that.
That makes it
300.
difficult for great, just wonderful. that makes it difficult for Cuban cigars to make on the list. And we're willing to, like, we've spent some money to buy cigars for review because we think it's important to review these sort of high-end Holy Grail cigars. But they're just tough to get, and we've tried. Believe me, Ramon Aliones Noeas, we would all love to smoke that Italian Edición Regional. Can't find those either. And so that's an issue. I would say that there is another issue with sort of the current state of Cuban cigars that's unrelated to the lack of new ones, and that is that we review new cigars for this list. And if you talk to people that smoke a lot of Cuban cigars, they will tell you a lot of times you need to buy it and let it age and mature because it's like wine and whatever. The problem here, and I don't disagree with that in a lot of cases, but the issue is that we're not reviewing cigars from 2016 that we've aged for 6 years for this list. We are reviewing new cigars. And so even pre-COVID, when the supply issues weren't what they are today, that was a big issue for us getting Cuban cigars. The final thing I will add, though, is that there was actually one of the 28 cigars was a Cuban cigar that we considered for this list. And that leads to another problem with Cuban cigars, which is that the consistency and the quality control is not always the greatest, and typically or oftentimes is quite problematic. And that cigar is the case of that. It scored really well. And we took 3 more cigars out of that box and passed them to the other reviewers, and I think 2 of us had pretty substantial construction issues. And to make it on this list, you can't have one cigar with substantial construction issues, let alone multiple of them. So now that I've talked about the one country that's not on there, congratulations to the factories in the 4 countries that did manage to put cigars on the list, because it's important. We'd love to review more Cuban cigars. Believe me, traffic-wise, they do great for us. It's just a matter of getting them and then, them scoring well. And I'm just not sure that at the current state we're in, and I don't think it's going to get much better in 2023, I don't think that it's likely to see a whole bunch of Cuban cigars on this list, just all things considered. If you want to learn more about this, I mentioned it a lot on Monday in the numbers review about sort of some of the issues we have with reviewing Cuban cigars and trying to review them. But it certainly is not intentional. We're going to blame it on somebody else. All right. Brooks, you got a closing thought?
Yeah, so looking at the list this year, one of the things that jumped out at me is the dominance of Connecticut wrap cigars in the top 10. 3 of the top 5 cigars incorporated Connecticut wrapper, albeit different origins, including the number 1 cigar of the year, a number that increases to 5 when you take into account the cigars that actually place in the top 10. So 5 of the top 10 have Connecticut wrapper of some sort. Now, the profiles and the sizes and strength levels and everything are all different, but the reviewers on the site have always had a fondness for Connecticut wrap cigars, and you can look through the reviews, the top 25 for past years. But it was really interesting to me that it seems like that's a trend, at least in our reviews, for the top 25 this year.
Yeah, I think my takeaway from the list this year was that the average cost of a cigar on this list, average MSRP, was $17.70. And I don't want to say that I'm disappointed in that number, but I'm certainly not thrilled about it. I've always liked having a list that you could point to and say, look, you can get a excellent cigar for $7, $8. This year there were 2 cigars that were under $10. And again, like when I talk about the universe, we're not shy about reviewing cigars that have a higher price tag. But knowing that there were only 2 that made the list this year is something I wish wasn't the case. I wish there were more sub $10 cigars to point to. I still believe in every cigar on this list. I still believe they're all worth their money. But again, it is an indication of some changing things in the cigar industry and how consumers, I think, may have to sometimes reevaluate sort of, what their threshold is. I remember still coming up in the days of, a $5 cigar was sort of the sweet spot. And then it became, well, keep it under 10. And now 10 is becoming harder and harder to achieve for any number of reasons, and we certainly see it this time of year. So again, I wish that number was a little bit lower, and I wish there were more sub $10 cigars, but certainly that's something we don't factor into the list. So Charlie?
Yeah, sorry about that, Patrick. Patrick alluded to it earlier, but he sort of said, didn't necessarily think this was the strongest list. And when you take a look under the hood at the numbers, or if you could, we're not going to publish them, but I did take a look at the numbers and compared this list to the previous 4, so looked at 5 years worth of lists. And because we rate the cigars and not necessarily rank them, it allows us to do some comparative analysis. And what that would show is that there is some truth to what Patrick said. If you look at the average score of the top 3, the top 5, the top 10, really the top half of the list, it is not as strong certainly as last year and amongst the other 4 years previously, so 18, 19, 20, 21. Not as strong. It's not massively off. We're talking about tenths of a point, hundredths of a point in a lot of cases, but it is noticeable. That said, the bottom of the list, the cigars sort of 13 to 25, those cigars actually a lot of times were either the highest rating for their positioning or the second highest rating of the last 5 years. So what that adds up to, A plus B, the difference between the number 25 cigar, the Diamond Crown Marquis with the spelling error on it, and the number 1 cigar, the Alfonso Extrañejo number 3, was just 3.1 points. Last year, that number, the range between numbers 1 and 25 was something like 6. It was like 5.7, 5.8. So a more compact list with the sort of back half of the list maybe having a bit better year, the top half of the list maybe not as strong as years prior. So not surprised to see sort of Patrick have that takeaway, given that the numbers bear that out quite a bit, or at least in a specific way. So with that said, that's the end of Half Wheel's Top 25. Thank you for a lot of you sticking around for our closing thoughts. There is one more Half Wheel related list. It is not our list. It is the consensus. It is just my favorite thing in the world. And it's going to be my favorite thing all weekend as I sit there and stare at Excel and other people's top cigars list. So the consensus, for those of you that don't know, it's been going on here. This is, I think, the 11th year of the consensus. And it was an idea I had before we started Half Wheel of taking the different top 10, top 20, top 25 list and Cigar Coop's case top 30 and putting them into one list and seeing if there was some consensus amongst the people that review cigars, whether that be cigar bloggers, cigar magazines, cigar podcasts, YouTubers, etc. And the consensus is something that a lot of people look forward to. And I'll be back here on Monday at the same time and places, I guess, Facebook and YouTube, to go through the consensus. It's going to be a different format of the show. It's just going to be me. Patrick will be on a plane, hopefully flying to Nicaragua for Pure Sabor. Brooks will be sort of manning the controls and not butchering Spanish in that regard. And I will be the one that's responsible for that. But if you have questions, whether it's about the consensus, our top 25, or about other things, that is the time, because it's going to be more of a Q&A type show. And so for those of you that are wondering about it, that will be when it shows up. I'd like to give a special shout out. A lot of the YouTubers I've seen so far this year have specifically shouted out the consensus and tried to make my job a little bit easier with getting their list into it. I really do appreciate it. Bob the Cigar Guy and a handful of others that have done that, because it really does make it a lot quicker on my end. 2 more shout outs. I'd like to thank Brian Burt. He's the 4th member of the Half Wheel review panel, and he used to review cigars from us, but he still sticks around for the top 25. He's got the worst Half Wheel job in the world. He gets paid to go cover the PCA convention and trade show, and then gets sent a whole bunch of really good cigars to evaluate throughout the year. But I really appreciate his continued work here. He's been with us since 2012, and he's a valuable member of the team, even if he doesn't get to be invited on here to butcher Spanish. I'd also like to thank Matt and the team at Bistro Studios. They're the ones that have put together a lot of the graphics, not the mess that you've seen on the screen right now, but when we publish the list in a few minutes on the site, they did a lot of work to really improve that last year, and really impressed with it. Brooks, Whittington, Patrick Lagreid, thank you for all of your hard work. It's been an interesting 36 hours trying to get this all together for you guys. I hope that the people that tuned in enjoy it, and we will publish it in a text and picture form in a couple minutes, so long as I don't fall asleep. And thank you so much for all of you that tuned in, and congratulations to all of the winners.